Sup everybody, Axe Wizard here. It's currently almost 2 o'clock in the morning and I've been working on my game, and I've got a whole nice list of things done. So let me talk about some of the stuff before I jump into the game. So I fixed a few trade window bugs. I'm not going to go into that right now. I've fully added a factions class, and because I only kind of half-ass implemented that when I ported my progress over to Godot. So I got that working, and then I also added a ship class type, like a variable, to all of my ships to help determine what behavior they should have during AI. So fighters, cruisers, carriers, and freighters all do something different. And I updated the combat AI. And so what I did there is fighters will just attack the closest thing. Like they love fighting. Cruisers, carriers, cruisers and carriers don't target the closest thing. They try to prefer something bigger than fighters, and they don't really go for freighters either. They prefer those last. So cruisers and carriers like to focus on the bigger ships, because those ships usually have a lot of turrets, and then so they can handle any of the fighters that might be attacking them. And just that change alone made the combat a lot better. And I also changed the AI so that fighters will just try to run through their target, and it makes a lot more interesting fights now. I also added a few more ships. I just generated some more art and then threw it together, and some stuff I like, some stuff I don't. And then I also got the big thing. I've got carriers working, roughly. Still need some work, but let's just jump into it. So as soon as I start, I cranked up the spawn rates, so it's going to keep spawning a bunch of ships. And then I also, because I implemented the faction system, as soon as they spawn in, if they detect any enemies, they're going to start fighting. So it's just going to be constant combat. So right now, we've already got some combat. We have this newer cruiser ship I added, a luxury cruiser. Looks kind of dumb, but whatever. Oh, there's a carrier over here. Check it out. He's got his carrier drones. Look at him go. Nice. So the player, I have my faction, I don't have a faction, so no one's attacking me. So right now it's just a big beatdown. It looks like that, is there another carrier? There is. Alright. So the carrier pops out a bunch of ships. So right now I have these little fighter drones. Can I even click on one? They're so tiny. There you go. Deployable fighter drone. So they have 75 shields. They're super weak. They only have one light cannon, and they just swarm stuff. So I've got the logic working for when a carrier enters combat. It starts deploying the drones or the fighters, whatever they have selected. But the fighters don't go back to the carrier when combat's over, because I haven't implemented that yet. Not like it'll work right now anyway, because there's just so much combat happening. But, so what you see happening is this, you see a lot of the bigger ships flying around, kind of ignoring the fighters, and just letting their turrets take care of them while they move to engage bigger ships. So I feel like this is a lot better combat, because what was happening before was the bigger ships just kept circling, trying to attack the fighters, and it was stupid. You have a capital flagship that's rotating the entire ship, trying to attack one little fighter, when normally it would just let its turrets take care of it. So I implemented that logic, and it was pretty painless. And I think the combat is now, it's a lot more active than it used to be. It used to be ships would just walk up and just, get in range and shoot, and then they would slow down, and then they would just keep shooting at each other. And that's what the bigger ships do for the most part. But now that you have the fighters, running around, and then you have the bigger ships not prioritizing attacking fighters directly, the combat seems much more like actual naval, like ship combat. And I think that's pretty cool. So like here's a carrier that just spawned. It's deploying its ships. It's got its turrets attacking the closest ship, and it's attacking the biggest ship. So pretty cool. The combat's pretty one-sided right now because and this is a freighter. This little guy that just spawned. This guy, he's dead already. So freighters, when they spawn, they will try to run away. So he's running away right now. But unfortunately, freighters are pretty slow. So if they're being chased by fighters, freighters can normally handle it with just their turrets. Because I think most of my freighters have like 5 or more turrets. So they're able to handle that pretty well. And they're able to just take out like 2 or 3 fighters, no problem. But if a cruiser or a carrier is following them and trying to take them down, they don't really. If they don't have enough of a head start, it doesn't go very well. So, but yeah, that's how it's going. Just for fun, let me just do carriers only. So let's go down in here and to my testing array. And we're just going to comment everything out except the carrier. All right, so it's carrier only. Let's start it. This is going to be a mess. Look at that. We got 2 carriers. They're deploying their drones. They show up on the mini map too. I need to make markers that are bigger and smaller. So it's now this looks like actual combat here. Look at this. This is nuts. We got big ships focusing on big ships. We got fighters just going all around, just doing whatever. The sound's starting to get a bit crazy because there's so many things going on. But look at the mini map. There's so many ships on the map right now. So each of these carriers right now can deploy up to 8 of these little attack drones. I'm going to have different levels of carriers, so like some carriers might only be able to deploy 2 fighters, some might be able to deploy 4, some might deploy 8, some might even deploy 1. I might have like big old bosses that deploy like 20. And it's not going to be confined to just these little fighter drones. I just picked those just cause. If I wanted to, I can actually have them pick different fighters. And oh my god, this is a tornado of fighter drones. Look at this. This is nuts. Look at all these little guys. It's insane. Oh my god, this is like in the movie Twister where they're trying to put like the sensors into the tornado and they're looking at it on the display. That's what it reminds me of. But yeah, so that's fun. But anyway, yeah. I just wanted to show that off. So yeah, so for carriers, I still have to make it so that if one of their deployed fighters is destroyed, if it's a carrier that has drones, I think it should be able to like manufacture more drones, but it takes a while. So if you deploy all your fighters and they're all dead, you're not just kind of sitting in the water. You can slowly sort of regenerate a fighter every now and then, depending on what it is. So if it's like if you have a carrier that deploys like the really high end fighters. So for example, if I go into my ship right now and I change the carried fighter scene, if I go and change this to, I think it's ship 9. No. Yeah, ship 9. So if I change it to that, this deploys a fighter that's got 4 cannons on it. Oh, I forgot I just disabled all that stuff again. All right, now we've got carriers only again. Now they're going to start launching out these epic fighters that do a ton of damage. Like, see these big guys? Like, you shouldn't be able to launch out like 8 of those. That's just like super overpowered. But the little drones, that's no big deal. But these fighters, these guys are pretty hardy. They've got 200 shields and 4 light cannons. So that's like 4 times the ship, basically. So maybe deploying 2 of these might be fair, but not 8 of them. So now we have a whole horde of these little blue fighters here that are just going around just ripping these guys apart because they've got so much firepower. So yeah, so carriers can carry different types of fighters. I just had a funny idea. What if the carrier like carries carriers? Can we do that? Is that going to cause a circular redundancy? Yeah, I figured it would. Yeah, I figured that wouldn't work. Maybe I can have like different types of carriers, but you know what? Maybe, maybe. Let's see. What other big ship do I have? Ship 6, I think, is my really big one. Like it used to be my biggest. So let's run that and see what happens. Bam! Look at that. It's just ooh, that's gross. That's so much. Look at that power. Oh my god. That was disgusting. Yeah, that's not a good idea. Let's just stick to fighters. How about that? So let me go back. I think it's ship 10 was my little drone fighter. Yeah, there we go. So yeah, I've got carriers working. I love it. I'm just watching these guys just pop out a bunch of ships that just go pew pew. Really fun. Oh man. So yeah, the game's coming along nicely. I'm kind of happy with how the combat's going. I mean, obviously when they all spawn on top of one another, it looks all derpy and janky. But yeah, I think this is starting to look really cool. Especially with the carriers, man. This is dope. Anyway, I guess I can go into some of the code. Why not? So the code I've got working. First things first, let's talk factions. So I created this factions class. And so currently I have the 2 testing factions, dudes and bros, same as it was before. But now I've got descriptions, and then I also am tracking their allied factions and also enemy factions. And what I'm doing is I also have some actual factions that I'm working on. So I've been AI generating like stuff. So I have the Coalition of Free Worlds, which is like a human-led faction. I've got the Harmonious Synthocracy, which is the AI faction that dominates humans. I've got the Elendari, which is like some mysterious, highly advanced alien race. I've got the Zerzalians, which are like this really just brutal, hostile, like alien race. Like there's no technology, it's all just biological. Like they just grow their ships and stuff like that. Think kind of like Zerg from like StarCraft, how they're all just aliens. Like all their buildings are like growing aliens and stuff like that. It's kind of like that same idea, but just not exactly. So then I have various functions here. So I've got a function to add to enemy factions that just takes in the 2 factions and just makes sure that both factions are now declared as, it's sort of like declaring war. And then remove from enemy factions is kind of like declaring a truce, right? You take 2 factions and you make sure that each faction views each other as no longer an enemy. Declaring war, you take 2 factions and make sure each faction thinks that the other is a enemy. So just simply verifying that the factions exist, and then if they don't already exist in the enemy list, we're just appending them to that array. And then we do same logic for allied. So taking 2 factions, making sure that they view themselves as allies, and then taking 2 factions and then making sure that they're no longer allies. So the reason why that's important is because we have this function called get all enemy ships of faction. So this took me a little bit of playing with to get, but this takes in 2 arguments. It takes in a faction, and then I also had to add in the scene tree. So since this is a class that I'm not instancing and adding to a child, I'm not adding it as a child, I'm not adding it to the scene tree. It doesn't have any scope of the tree, so I have to pass this in. So I have a note here that says, note, we have an unusual parameter of the scene tree type. Since this is a class that is not instanced and added to any scene, we don't have access to the scene tree, which we normally do with get tree. So the calling instance is expected to provide it. So that's why that's there. So what we're doing here is we're just verifying that our tree is valid. If it's not, do nothing. We're setting up an output array. And then what we're doing is we're checking, hey, does our target faction even exist? If it doesn't, then just do nothing. And then what we're doing is we're iterating through all the enemy factions of our target faction and finding any ships belonging to them. So for any enemy factions, I have a loop here. We're getting all the nodes that are in that group of that faction. And then we're determining if they are a ship, which they all should be, but I'm trying to future-proof it because maybe there might be other faction stuff that's not ships. There might be faction locations, things like that. So if it's not a ship, continue iteration. If it is, then we append that. And then I have a to-do here because I'm also going through the enemy's allied factions and adding those to my enemy array. But I have a to-do. So what if an allied faction is allied with an enemy faction? So like what if one of my allies is allied with like who I'm fighting with too? So there could be a potential problem there to where just everybody fights, and that's not good. So I have a to-do there for now, but for now I'm just checking also like, hey, for my allied factions, I think I have a bug here. I meant to have this be F. So any allied factions of our enemies. So I haven't tested this at all yet. So like the allied part, so that this wasn't even firing before, but that's the intent. So I just want to have like one function that can just get all the enemies and just return it. And then what's happening is in my main, when I'm creating a ship, I'm just like, hey, determine if any threats exist to this ship. I'm saying, hey, enemies, I'm getting factions, get all enemy ships of a faction, of the faction of the ship I just created. And then for all those enemies, I'm iterating through and I'm adding that ship to my enemies list and I'm adding myself to that ship's enemies list. So it seems like it's a lot going on. It seems like it might be inefficient, but it's working. So I might improve that later. So once I got the faction stuff working, I tweaked some stuff in the main here for my testing code. So for example, for my spawning, I'm spawning every 2 to 5 seconds now rather than every 5 to 10. And I'm just alternating dudes and bros for factions. So that's what I got there. And then for ship, let's see. So there's a few things I did. So first things first, I have this cool thing. I figured out that you can export. If you do export and then you declare like what type it is, you can have several parameters here, and then it creates a drop down. So if I go to my ship scene, if I go to ship 13 here, you can see like for ship class over here, I can have this drop down and I can pick fighter, cruiser, carrier, or freighter. That way I always have it choosing one of those, so I don't have to worry about like a typo or something like that, which is nice. So I added this ship class variable, so it's defaulted to fighter. So this just determines combat behavior. And then I have some carrier stuff here that I just slapped together. I might refine all this and just throw it into a single dictionary for carrier stuff. Still working on it though. So I even have some more stuff thrown together there. But anyway, so what we've got going on, let's talk about the AI changes. So this is to deploy fighter. We'll get into that. So let's see here. So first thing I have here is in AI state idle, which is where we determine a lot of our like what the ship should be doing. So we have the code where we're getting a target, and then if we find out that we do have a target, and we're normally getting the closest enemy, I also have closest preferred target now as well, and it just has the same logic. So when we start getting the distance and trying to see how far away a enemy is, I have this flag like preferred, and I just set this to be false. And then I have this match statement running, and I'm like saying, hey, if we are a fighter, fighters want to tackle bigger ships. So I made fighters prefer to fight everything but fighters. Because if you have fighters fighting fighters, they just kind of run around each other for a lot, and they never seem to hit each other. But if you have fighters going after bigger ships, then you get that thing I was going for, to where they're strafing through and trying to, like, you know, they're doing actual fighter runs on them, which is cool. So that's what I've got going on there. So yeah, if the ship class is not a fighter, then we've got a bigger ship. That's our preferred target, so we're setting preferred to true. For the case of if it's a cruiser or a carrier, cruisers and carriers prefer to let their turrets handle smaller ships, like I was talking about earlier. They don't like to pursue freighters unless there are no other options. So what they are looking for is like, hey, if make sure that the enemy here is not a fighter or a freighter. If it is, that means it's a cruiser or a carrier. That means it's a preferred target. Cool. So what's happening here is I'm just doing the closest enemy, and then if this was a preferred target, then I'm calculating that as well. So I'm setting that there. And then what's going on here is when I go to set the closest enemy, if I have a closest preferred target set, I prefer to target that instead. So again, fighters prefer cruisers, carriers, and freighters. Cruisers and carriers prefer cruisers and carriers, and freighters don't want to fight at all, so they just run. So what I have there is, now that we have determined like the target, you'll see here I have this, if ship class is freighter, then we just do state retreat. So I also added the retreat state, which needs some work as well, but earlier before it would just go into like attacking or intercepting. If it's a freighter, they don't want to fight, they want to get the hell out of there. So that's what I implemented there. They just go into state retreat and they just try to get out of the system and just hyperdrive away. But I don't have the little warp drive thing implemented yet or whatever. So yeah, that's the biggest thing I did there. And then the other change I did was doing intercept. If the ship class is carrier, they're trying to deploy fighters, and then I think I also did that during attack. So if they're trying to intercept or attack, and they're going to try to deploy fighters, and what that does is deploy fighters just again checks if we are a carrier. If we're not a carrier, do nothing. If we've already deployed all of our fighters, do nothing. If we're still cooling down, because we can't just deploy like 8 carriers or 8 fighters simultaneously, there's like a second cooldown. So I have carrier deploy interval here. So I have it set to 1. So every second you can deploy 1 fighter. So if it's not time yet, then just do nothing. If it is time, then deploy a fighter. So what we're doing here is we're just instancing the scene that we have set here. I can get rid of this because this is no longer needed. That was for debug purposes. So we are getting the root node, and then we're getting the main node, and then we're adding as a child of that the fighter. We're setting that fighter's global position. We're setting that fighter's carrier variable, which I'm not even using yet, to be me, the carrier. I'm setting the faction to equal my faction. I'm setting the fighter's enemies to equal my enemies. And then I'm also appending that fighter to my deployed fighters array, which I started, but I'm not using yet, because that's going to allow me to track if a fighter exists or not. And so, yeah, that's what I got going on there. And I'm also playing the sound of a fighter deploying, and then I'm resetting the carrier deploy timer. So that's all the changes I made there to make all that stuff work. So just a few changes, and it works great. I'm actually pretty pleased with how it's working out. And then the other stuff I did, I just fixed, last time we went over the trade system. So I just fixed all the bugs there. So nothing really cool to show, but let's go back to main. And so I fixed the in hold column, not in initializing. So even if you had 500 something in the hold, it would still say 0. I fixed that. Let's actually go into what that looked like in case you're interested. So trade window. So that was just in my ready function here when I'm setting up my table. Label. So yeah, when I'm actually going through and iterating through all the items, I'm setting up the table. Column 3 or column 2. I was just before I was just setting this to be 0, but now I'm actually setting this to be the inventory key or the actual number of items that we have. So it's actually setting that. So that's what that was. That was pretty cake to fix. I think I even fixed that on camera last time. I fixed a case where an equal trade could not be finalized. So if we go back and we go to our summary, update summary here. I had logic in here that was basically at the end, it was saying like, hey, if there's no change in funds, then button finalized disabled equals true. And then I actually added this, like, did we actually trade goods though? And I added this can finalize variable. And how that's working is, so I have this variable here. I set it to be false, and when I'm comparing the differences between the account, I'm setting this to be true. So if we bought any items at all or sold any items at all, even if you bought 500 of something and you sold 500 of something, and it's 0, like you're not going to make or lose any money. You still did a trade. You still need to actually finalize that trade so you can get those goods. So I just added that can finalize flag and then just made sure that the button finalize disabled is false, which means it's enabled. And that's all I did there. I fixed a shift click bug that I found after I think I stopped recording. So you could, if you shift clicked, you could buy 10 of something even if you couldn't afford it. And so I fixed that bug, and I think that was in my buy function. And I just forgot to add this check here where can we actually afford that amount, because I was doing the I thought I was doing that already, but that was only for if amount to buy was less than 0, which means we need to buy max. And then I was only checking the cargo. So I added the check to say, hey, can we actually afford that amount? If we don't have enough, then limit it to how much we can actually afford. So same thing. So fix that bug, easy peasy. And then the buy sell buttons are now properly disabled if you can't afford or don't have anything to sell. So I worked those out. So I worked out those bugs. Those weren't too hard to work out. Pretty easy there. Let's go over that last one. I think for that, I just added this function called update buy sell buttons. And like anytime that you do an action that would affect these, it just calls this function and just checks this stuff to see if they should be disabled or not. So that's all I did there. So let's see. I talked about the factions class already. I talked about the added ship class, the fighter, cruiser, carrier, freighter. I talked about the updated combat AI. Again, not very huge changes, but just enough to make it more interesting and actually a lot more dynamic, which is cool. I added some more ships. You probably saw most of them, but if you want to see more up close, pull this up here. So if we hide this and hide this, you can see this is the little ship, the little drone. I just used a site called Vessel Forge. So if I go to Vessel Forge, you can basically just generate a bunch of different ships. So you can choose to have engines and guns disabled. You can choose it if you want like a simple ship. So I was just generated a few of these, so I found one I liked. And then I think I might try to generate some like larger ones and maybe like layer a bunch of those. Now I think I'm debating or not with if I want to do all of my ships like in this fashion or not. Because the more I start learning about this AI art stuff, the more I'm kind of wary of it. especially if the art that I end up using is accidentally based off of an artist's work that doesn't want their art to be replicated. Like, you don't really have a choice. If it's like on the internet, then an AI art generator model like scrapes it and uses it to generate stuff, and you don't really have any control over it. So I've been intentionally not doing like in the style of, so I'm not generating stuff deliberately in the style of any artists, but that doesn't mean that it still doesn't happen. So what I've been doing is I've been finding like screenshots of like boats and like random ships and like actual photographs, and then I've been using those as a template and having Stable Diffusion generate modifications of that. So I kind of like the idea of using VesselForge, creating like a bunch of bigger ships, and I can layer these bad boys and like rotate them around like as much as I want. And then once I get a ship that I kind of like, I can pop that into Stable Diffusion and then just have it generate a bunch of different variations. So if I pop open the art generator I use, it's going to be super slow. I'm not going to be able to actually generate anything while I'm recording because it uses up like all of my GPU. But if we open this up here, you can see all these different variations I've been generating of various things. So like this is, you see my little blue fighter here, I was generating a bunch of different variations of that. A lot of it sucks. Some of it's okay. Other variations of various art. So you can see I was playing around with different variations of this weird ship thing that looks like a shark stingray thing. So I've just been generating a lot of different variations of those and finding ones that look pretty good. Like this one I actually used for in the game. Not all of these are great. Again, AI art is pretty rough and it looks like it. So I've just been kind of going through and seeing what looks cool and what doesn't, and then just generating variations off of that while trying to omit using anyone's actual art. So, because I know that if I was a talented artist and, you know, I was producing art and maybe that was what I did for a living, that would suck if people can just, you know, type in, you know, AI art in the style of Axe Wizard, and then they wouldn't need me anymore. So I can definitely understand that. And also the fact that AI art, like, it's getting better. Like if you use like Midjourney version 5 or something like that, but you're just using some of the other stuff like the old DALL-E Mini and stuff like that, the art is not good. So it's pretty rough. So I understand that. And then now with AI advancing like way faster than any government's ability to regulate it, it's not really a question right now of if it's legal. It's just a question of right now of if it's the right thing to do. And I don't feel morally right just generating art. Like if you go on YouTube and you look for some of the earlier AI art generation tutorials, a lot of them are telling you to do like, oh, in the style of Greg Rutkowski, and that poor guy. There's so many. It's so bad now that when you search for his name, it's not even showing up his art anymore. It's showing up AI generated art based off of his that looks like crap. And it's not good. And so if you just take, you know, all forms of art, so for example, not just images, but also now AI is able to reproduce sounds, so people's voices, so voice actors, they are also being threatened right now too by this. You know, how many YouTube videos are there of like AI presidents who were like doing tier lists of various games or like playing Counter-Strike or Call of Duty or whatever, that are just AI generated voices with just people typing in scripts, and then the AI voices it with their inflections and styles. And as this grows, if I was a voice actor, I would feel pretty threatened by that. Also, like music, they're starting to come out with AI generated music that can do all the samples and everything like that. So if you're like a producer or an actual musician, it's still got a ways to go, but it's catching up. And then, yeah, it's just, and especially like for me as a developer, like I have skills I've developed over the years of programming and putting things together, and then now I can just go to Chat GPT and just ask it a question and it just types everything out for me. It's not going to be too long until I'm obsolete. So, yeah, it's kind of a conundrum, but this game I'm working on is going to be about the future and how AI sort of took over humanity. So it's only fitting that I have AI do all the work for me. But yeah, fun stuff there. So anyway, back to what I was doing before I went on that tangent. This is ship 10. Let me turn these back on before I forget. Ship 11 is this long boy. Let me turn this off and this off. So this is like some long sort of cruiser ship. I think I call this one a luxury cruiser. It looks okay. I'm probably not going to keep that one, but it's in there for now. This one, this monstrosity, this is a turtle freighter. So this is a big slow boy. It's got like 8 turrets on it, and that's all the weapons it has. So that's pretty cool. Boom, turn that off, and then the biggest boy, we have the Synthocracy flagship, which is the carrier right now. So this behemoth here, you probably saw already. But yeah, this thing has 2 medium cannons in the front and a missile launcher. And then it's got, I think it's got 8 light turrets on it, in addition to being able to launch out 8 fighters. It's kind of a tank. So yeah. Again, I'm still kind of like, I'm not sure if I want to keep any of these ships. I know for a fact that I'm not going to keep ships 1, 2, 3, and 6. Because if we look at those, I'm very sure that these are based off of an artist's artwork. And I don't think it's right to use it. So I've been using it for testing, but I don't think it's going to make it in the final product, even though these are some of my favorite ships. So yeah, that's fun. So ship 2 is just a variation of that. So this is another kind of a cool ship. Like this looks awesome. This looks like a high-tech spaceship. Like I can't even see what's going on in half this stuff, but it looks awesome. But I'm pretty sure this is based off of a real artist's work, because this is so cool. And I don't know whose original art it was, but I'm sure it's somebody. So I'm not going to use it. And same for my little shuttle here. Those based off of the same thing. So not going to use that. And then this big chongus here. This was also based off of someone's art. I'm very sure of it. So not going to use those. So I'll need to start phasing those out and step up my AI art generation game based off of like images that I can take. I've been actually even seeing if maybe I can use my green screen and then like just put like, I don't know, like cans of Coke or Pepsi or something like that, and just kind of like set it there and like make like my own spaceship outlines with various objects, and then pop those into the AI art generator to see what kind of styles it can tweak to it. So that's going to be a while, but it's a process. Who knows? I might even just actually hire an artist to just do art. I don't know. But yeah, so. But yeah, that's the state of the game right now. I just wanted to share that I did a bunch of AI stuff, and I got combat looking cool, and I'm pretty happy with how it's working out. So I added more ships, and then I think I already went over how carriers work. So yeah, that's what I've done. So I've done these. So I'm debating what I want to do next. I'm not sure if I might just work on trying to generate and replace, generate more art and replace those ships that I feel are probably stolen artwork. And then I kind of want to start on like an overworld thing where it's like a map of the galaxy and you can go to different star systems. I think I might start on that. So anyway, it's probably going to be a while before the next episode, but I just wanted to share progress, and thank you all so much for watching. I appreciate it, and I'll see you in the next video.